Hi, class. Welcome back to another week of creative writing. I felt like I wanted to make a webcast to do a little bit of a State of the Union message, so to speak, of where we are. I'm very pleased with all of you who've continued to participate in the course and submit your work on time. And I want you to realize that sometimes the assignments, as they're listed out in each week's content, look a lot bigger than they actually are. And there will be a kind of a break coming up in the week 5 work because I'm going to send you a packet of short stories and ask you to have a nice discussion about them and see if you can apply some of the concepts that were covered in the opening weeks of the course in discussing those stories as models for your own writing. This week 4 coming up looks like a lot of writing, and I have done kind of a lot of commentary around the your turns that I'm going to ask you to complete from chapter 2 of writing fiction. I thought that what I would do is go through each of the your turn assignments just very briefly, and I've tried to make a quick little summary of each assignment after the words to do that I've highlighted with a kind of flamingo pink box. I summarize in a nutshell what each to-do assignment is about. And these again come from the Your Turns in Chapter 2. I've offered some modifications to enlarge the possibilities for you. Essentially what you're doing this week is creating your characters that I hope you will be able to employ in a future short story that you write. There's kind of a chicken or egg question about writing, about creative writing, that I want to address here and just very briefly. In other words, some writers have a concept of a plot, of a series of actions, of events that they would like to create, and they create the characters to fulfill their plot device or their plot ideas. Other people have an idea of a character first and then put the characters into motion and figure out, well, what would a character like the one I've created or the kind of person I want to read about, what would that person do in different situations? And so, which comes first, the character or the plot? I actually used a book several years ago that was divided perfectly in half. It's a Writer's Digest book titled Character versus Plot. You might look it up. And it talked about the fact that there are two broad types of creative writers in the fiction category: those who like to invent characters and put characters in motion and discover what their plot is by envisioning what a particular character might do in a set of life situations. And then there are those who are plot driven. Maybe you want to write a novel about the end of the world. There are plenty of those, but there's always room for one more. And so the story is about that broad subject. That's the driving force of the story. And then the characters are invented to experience whatever the plot is that the writer has invented. So we are right now operating by creating characters first. In reality, a writer may operate in both of those worlds, sort of inventing a character and then sort of figuring out, well, what do I want to happen? Or I want an adventure story with a young girl going abroad for the first time. And I was just reading an editorial, by the way, in the London Review of Books. Started subscribing to that very challenging and interesting publication over the summer. And it talked about the idea of a girl. The idea of girl in the titles of some books has made them very successful. Gone Girl was one of the books reviewed by this writer, and she found it reprehensible. I saw the film and I found it reprehensible, but the book has been very, very popular because of the girl in the title. Anyway, it would be interesting to talk to an author like that and find out, was it the character that you created first? Or was it the plot idea of a woman who betrays her husband and gets him framed for her murder that never occurred? Did the writer have that idea first and then create the kind of woman who would be able to carry out that idea? Or did the writer create the woman with kind of the twisted personality and then figure out, well, what could she do if pushed to an extreme? So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question for that particular book. Um, so it should be a fun week because you don't have a lot of writing. A couple of these assignments are just sentences or just the bare bones of an idea. And let me take you through them quickly. The first assignment is to come up with what kind of character you're interested in. And the book gives you the idea that you might write about an actor, singer, or magician. This is the Your Turn on page 28 of chapter 2 in Writing Fiction. I mean, there's nothing wrong with creating a character who's an actor, singer, or magician. If you are familiar with the lives of those kinds of folk or want to develop that, but that might not be what you want to do your final story about. And I'm recommending that you create a character that you would actually want to be reading about. And so I would like you to do that and save some time. Actually start developing a kind of character that might be in your final short story. All you have to do for the first Your Turn on page 28 is think of the kind of character you want. So like my character, if I want to write about a girl like my own niece who's 24 and just traveled to Argentina over the summer and was out and about and alone in the world, but connected with some friends down there, but still a young woman traveling alone. That's the person I could create right now in this activity. And then I'm supposed to think about a desire for that person. What does she want? I should call my niece up and ask, what is your chief desire? She's actually a math teacher outside of Austin, Texas, and I think right now what she really wants in life is to feel successful in her first career out of college. She earned a master's in math and is working with students and enjoying helping them learn. She teaches a lot of advanced math. It was not my favorite subject, but she loves it. And so I could picture a character like her, alone, out in a big city. She grew up in California. She lives in Texas. My character could be in some other locale. I traveled a lot to New England in my life, and so I would maybe put a character out in that landscape because I've seen that landscape and it seems more exotic perhaps to me or more interesting than Iowa, although certainly I could write about a character from Iowa. So all I need to think about is what kind of character. So I could say a young woman just out of college on her own for the first time in a career that she loves. I've always had a fantasy about working in an art gallery, so maybe my character's in an art gallery in the college town where she graduated, and she just wants to experience life and not have a lot of pressure, and the job could have some interesting features or qualities about it. I visited a really neat gallery in Nova Scotia this summer that had a beautiful window that looked right out on the ocean. And I told the young woman who was there selling these tapestries that I thought, wow, what a great view every day. No matter what the ocean looked like, even on a gray, cloudy, horrific day, the color and the light and just the change of scenery, how the water would always look different probably every day, would be so fascinating. So I've just been talking and riffing here, and I've already got my character. She's in the art gallery, so I've left my niece now behind, and I've got this new character. And what does she want? Maybe she wants to be an artist herself. The woman in the art gallery that I'm inspired by now this summer seemed to really admire the elderly lady who had these beautiful, they were like quilt tapestries. They were gorgeous and incredibly expensive, but she seemed like she loved the art too, and that she would want to have her own place someday. And she seemed to be in awe of the woman whose gallery she was running. I could look up the name of the fiber artist who actually inspired this thought that I'm having now, but that I could put in writing to you. Maybe send you a picture of that work. It was beautiful. So there's my person, young woman in an art gallery in a beautiful locale, and her driving desire is to become the artist that she wants to be and live the life like the woman whose art she sells every day. Okay, so there's her driving desire. And it's, I don't know if it's supposed to be a concrete desire. And so I'm going to go with the concept that I posted there, uh, a career break. And it came from your own text. She wants a career break, someone to discover her. I'm hedging away from turning it into a love story. I think, although I love romances, I'm just going to say that the woman's desire right now is a career break. One of the other suggestions for that is a touch of a certain person, and that came right out of your text, but I'm going to say that she doesn't want the touch of a certain person. She wants to make something of her own life. So I mean, that's a few sentences. I've done a lot of talking to tell you that your turn for page 28 is a few sentences. All right, I'll go more quickly through the others. The next your turn asks you to think of two contrasting traits of this same character you just invented. That one is described on page 32 and also in the course content commentary that I've provided. So what are my character's contrasting traits? I think that she, on the good side, has a very wonderful appreciation of art and craftswomanship. And she loves color and light and finds that art helps her notice the details of the world. A contrasting trait might be, and your text seems to set this up where it would be something that would be kind of something bad, I mean, a kind of a flaw, as opposed to just something very minor. So what would a young woman who I'm so positive about and who has this wonderful view of art and an appreciation of nature, what could be a negative trait? I don't want to make her materialistic. And I could see that a woman like that might think that she's unworthy of being well known, or that she has self-confidence issues. But that doesn't directly contrast with her wonderful trait of appreciating the world. I'm demonstrating for you right here how I'm thinking this out. I'm doing this assignment right now spontaneously. I guess the opposite of being an observant person and someone who appreciates nature would be, and this to truly create a contrasting trait, would be that there are things that she's not noticing in her own life. And we haven't fabricated who her family is, or is she, perhaps she looks down on her parents. I could give her parents maybe some qualities that she would not admire as an artist. Maybe her mother had a disdain for art, or now I'm giving the negative quality to the mother. Something about her parents has turned her off to being observant about them. Maybe she feels that with her fancy, presumably fancy art education, that she's kind of superior to her parents, that they've lived poor little meaningless lives, going to church suppers, okay, I'm inventing now, and uh, mowing the lawn, reading the paper, walking their dog, and never really traveling very much, never really leaving their own neighborhood, just kind of taking care of their own and maybe their neighbors. And she feels like they're not cultured. And so she doesn't notice things about them, maybe their failing health or other beauties in them. She's observant of nature and seagulls and the ocean and light, but her own parents, the people who gave her the opportunity to get the art education that she has, she doesn't look at them as being part of that beautiful cultured world. There, I've invented her contrasting trait, and in my mind, as a moral person, your parents, unless they've been cruel and don't deserve your love for some reason, if your parents have been hardworking and loving and giving to you and have helped launch you into the world, you owe them something. And yet somehow, I guess my character, as wonderful as she is artistically and as enthused as she is about that world, her contrasting trait is that she puts down her own background, maybe even hiding comments about her parents when people ask, because she's not proud of them, and she has a disdain for them and for what they represent in society. Okay, there. Seems like a lot of words, but I could condense that to a few sentences. So I've got my contrasting traits of my character. Now, the next your turn is to bring this person to life. And they want you to put this character in motion. They don't give you in this, meaning they, it's actually the Gotham Writers Workshop folks and the author Brandy Reisenweber. A different author writes each chapter of your text. Brandy says, just put the character in motion, write a scene from their day. And she wants this particular little scene to illustrate the contrasting traits of the character. So you're jumping right into the middle of things. We've learned who your character is from the earlier exercise. We know what your character's desire is. We know your character's contrasting traits. Those are dispatched easily in a couple of sentences. Now you're going to write something that the book describes as a passage. I use the term scene because we've been studying scene with Sandra Schofield in your scene book. So what would my scene be with my character to try to show the contrasting traits? I mean, we could just take her on a typical morning where a customer comes in wanting to look at one of the tapestries. And like the woman in my memory from Canada this summer, this woman sort of waxes poetic about the beautiful work that the artist whose work she's selling does. And she points out all of the lovely colors of the sea in the tapestry. And so she shows her beautiful appreciation of nature and of the art. And then maybe during that sort of a potential sale that she's trying to make in the gallery, for some reason her mother calls, and her mother is telling her about maybe the church centennial that's happening in the small town where she was born. It could be a Canadian town. There were so many beautiful little churches in so many of the small towns all over Prince Edward Island and all over Nova Scotia that I've seen in the last 2 summers. So it could be a town church celebration, and she just wants to remind her daughter to come in that weekend and maybe bring a casserole. Who knows? It could be something very ordinary like that, and it could be a phone conversation then, and I could show how my young art student is short with her mother, is curt with her mother, whines about, oh, all those little old ladies and their bingo games. And it would show kind of a harsh and inconsiderate side to my character, and also illustrate how culturally she doesn't appreciate the history and beauty and love of her family's church, because it's just like she's thinking of a bunch of little old ladies and men and bingo games and who wants to eat some greasy casserole. She eats Asian fusion food in her little gallery strip of the little fancy city where she lives by the ocean, and she doesn't think much of her small town. So there's my scene. I would have the character interrupted as she's waxing poetic about this textile, to have her mom call her and remind her of something that she has disdain for that's back in the town where she's from. And maybe have her try to hide that from the person who's come into the gallery, and because she's trying to convey the impression that she is cultured and artistic and sort of above, and that's why you'd spend 2,800 Canadian or American dollars to buy a wall-sized tapestry. That's what the ones I'm thinking about in the gallery I was in actually cost, and maybe even more than that. And all I bought there, by the way, in my real life experience, was like a couple of postcards that had images of these tapestries. But in any event, there's my little scene, and oh, that would be fun to write. Then the next thing that you have to do, your turn on pages 38 and 39, is just to answer some questionnaire questions. There are 3 questionnaires, 2 in your book on pages 38 and 39, and another one that is recommended by the Gotham Writers Workshop that's from their website, and I went ahead and put the hyperlink right in the assignment, so you can open that up and select questions that you would like to answer about your character. Every question won't necessarily apply. One of the most intriguing over the years that I have found fascinating is what is in your character's refrigerator. Now, obviously, if you're going to do a historical piece of fiction set in the Renaissance, I'm hoping maybe you'll pick something contemporary. There's not going to be a refrigerator. I suppose you could put what is in your character's larder, or I mean, if that were relevant somehow to your understanding of the character. I've just decided that what is in my character's refrigerator is important, because my character has disdain, and I've just invented this now, for the church casserole uh, cuisine that she remembers from her youth in a small town. And she has maybe white wine, grapes, foreign cheeses and crackers and pates and hummus. I love hummus, by the way, but those could be some of the kinds of things in her fridge, and that would help me further think about her character. So I would definitely select that question and many of the others that are in those questionnaires. Easy. And you don't have to use the information that you come up with in answering these questions in a story that you might later write about the character, but it just helps you think more about who is this whole person whom I am inventing. Okay, and then finally, and I'm giving you some extra time, 2 extra days on the very last your turn. I've put a deadline of not next Friday night for it, but next Sunday. And that is where you take this character and you put this character in a completely different situation. And the situation should bring out um, some action on the part of the character, even though in your book it suggests that you just stick this character in a waiting room, and it turns out a therapist's waiting room. But I give you broader latitude, and so please read my commentary, and I've been tweaking my that assignment this morning. I changed a little bit of the wording, very minor. Those of you who might have read it last night when I first posted it wouldn't notice any particular difference. I always look back at my sentences and give myself a little bit of time, and then I might rework a sentence structure. There were a few things that I corrected. But you want to take this character, so I would take my young woman from the gallery, and I have to put her in a different situation, and I must show an action, even if it's just her sitting in a waiting room. I don't like that one as much as maybe some of the other suggestions that I offer. I have to show her speaking. I had her speaking to a customer in the previous scene, but I could have her make some kind of comment to someone in the scene. I must finally bring the reader some sense of her appearance, and I would casually work that in. I wouldn't just sit and describe her and then have her go into the scene. Appearance details should be woven in casually. Maybe a character's wearing a particular kind of jacket. Like I'm wearing my favorite Pale Robin's egg blue linen jacket that I got like 10 or 15 years ago from a catalog. And it's kind of rumply and lovely, and I just washed it, but linen always looks kind of wrinkled. I love natural fibers like that, so maybe my character would too. Art gallery people tend to like kind of boutique-y, natural fiber looks. I mean, there's a certain kind of artistic sensibility that flows into what the clothing that someone might wear. So I would think about my character's appearance details, and then she's going to have some thoughts in this scene that I put her in. And I would say this piece of writing could be 1 page, 2 pages. It just depends. And it's just a scene. It's not a whole story. You just dive bomb right in. Once I know that your character is, like mine, an artist working in a fancy little art gallery with disdain for her parents and a love of the natural world and a love of art and color, I've got my character. Now I'm just going to put her in a situation, but this situation is unrelated maybe to the story you'd write. One of the other suggestions, and you might like this one better, is to put the character in a stressful situation. Now they suggest at gunpoint, but I point out I don't like that. I don't want to put myself through imagining my character at gunpoint. I suppose I could put her in a scene where the gallery gets robbed, but I just feel like that's so unlikely, and I would rather have her maybe have some kind of stressful situation when she goes home to the church social, when she gives in and goes home. Or maybe I would have her in a waiting room because her dad, before that even happened, has a heart attack that week. And so there she is, and maybe she's missing some important gallery opening, and she's there in the hospital waiting room, suddenly thinking about the vulnerability of her parents. So there, I've got it all worked out. I would play with one of those ideas. So you have the waiting room scene that you can do, and I've said that it could be in a restaurant, it could be in a lawyer's office, it could be in a nail salon, it could be in a place where you take your pet. I've offered you many more opportunities than the more limited suggestions in your text. And so you have some additional time to develop that scene. You could be working on the other things through the week and work on that a little longer next weekend. Or you could knock this all off this weekend. You're really only being asked to maybe do uh, smaller bits of writing. These are scenes, and I realized that the film, The Most Beautiful Thing, had a lot more that you had to write if you covered the whole thing. If you have any questions, please contact me, call me this weekend, or email me. I'll check my email periodically. Remember, I'm reading the work you've just submitted, and thank goodness I have all of the weekend, unlike last weekend where my time was kind of stolen away by a big family event that had been scheduled for many, many years. So this weekend I have the luxury of just digging right into the things you've submitted. Uh, I hope all of you received the envelope from me with your Most Beautiful Thing selections. Just tweak those a little bit more, and if you have questions about those or want to send me uh, a draft that you're just cleaning up and maybe editing and revising in some way, just give me a phone call, let me know you've sent it, and I'll take a look at it. I think I'd be very happy to do that. So I will hope that I can share maybe the opening paragraphs of those Most Beautiful Thing pieces, identified if you gave me permission to, and not identified if you either didn't give me any permission at all or if you told me to publish anonymously. I just think it would be neat to see how everyone opened those, and then those of you who gave me permission to publish, I could go ahead and post some of those pieces, because I want you to see how you write and try to make this like a real classroom. And it's more challenging online, but I'm going to make it work. So please let me know how I can help you. I know I talked a long time here, but I wanted to show you how it may look like there's a lot of assignment in what's been assigned for week 4, when in fact you've been given a very creative task of inventing a character, coming up with a few simple concepts about that character, and essentially you're writing 2 scenes with that character. So take a look at the your turns in your text first, and the page numbers I've designated, and then go and read my commentary under course content, where I've embellished each of those your turn suggestions with some more ideas. And let me know what questions you have as you begin bringing your characters to life for this week. Take care and have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing what you write. Thank you very much.